This is Nude in a studio, and this painting was cancelled. Though it might look like your average harmless standing nude, it was taken off the walls of the AGO, the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto, after creating outrage and controversy in 1933. The reason why it garnered so much disapproval might surprise you. To really understand why this painting was cancelled, we'll need to investigate not only the painting itself, but also the art world in general, and what my favorite art critic has to say about all this. First, let's take a look at the painting. It's titled Nude in a Studio, and it was made by Lilias Torrance Newton in 1933. This was an unusual work for her to make. She became known for her portraits between the two world wars, would become the third woman to join the Royal Canadian Academy in 1937, and would even be the first Canadian artist to paint a portrait of Queen Elizabeth in 1957. The painting is about 2 meters tall, making it a life-size, full-body nude portrait. The model is casually standing in a studio. She has one hand on her hip, the other on her shoulder, partly covering her breasts, but she's not covering them out of modesty or prudishness. This woman shows off a confidence, and her nakedness doesn't seem to make her vulnerable. This could be overlooked, but she's standing in front of another portrait. This one is of a man, heavily dressed for the cold winter scene he's placed in. Our model obscures this painting. This is a deliberate choice. Normally, you'd want the model's head to be free of any distractions for it to garner attention, but here, you have two faces superimposed on one another, leaving little to no separation between her face and the background. Now, you might think that this nude woman placing herself in front of a heavily dressed man could be perceived as provocative. Maybe that's what caused the controversy. Well, no. But gender did play a part in it. It's important to note that Torrance Newton founded in 1920 with other Montreal artists the Beaver Hall Group. This group was founded by 11 men and 8 women. This is incredibly important, as if it was a woman's group, it would have delegitimized the practice of those artists, labeling them as hobbyists. However, they were mixed, putting the women in the group on the same level as men. Of course, this isn't groundbreaking today, but keep in mind that this was 20 years before women were allowed to vote in Quebec. As the president of the group, A.Y. Jackson, put it, the Beaver Hall Group wanted to give the artist the assurance that he can paint what he feels, with utter disregard for what has hitherto been considered requisite to the acceptance of the work at the recognized art exhibitions in Canadian centers. This group came into being as a rebellious coalition of artists, not only for including women, but for communicating clearly that they will break some rules. What caused the controversy was the fact that she was a modern woman with pubic hair, wearing nail polish, makeup, and, most controversially, green-laced sandals. The traditional nude is quote-unquote natural. She doesn't wear makeup, nor does she wear nail polish, she doesn't have pubic hair, and certainly doesn't wear sandals. Lilias Torrance Newton broke the rules for painting a nude, but she wasn't chastised for simply breaking rules. Here's what art critic Donald Buchanan wrote in 1935. The Montreal painter Lilias Torrance Newton, it will be remembered, committed this sin last year. The board of the Toronto Art Gallery refused to hang her painting in the show of the Canadian group of painters. They called the model a naked lady, not a nude, you see, for she wore green slippers. This model isn't a nude. She's a naked lady. Now, this might be confusing to some of you, so to understand the distinction between nudity and nakedness, we're going to take a look at a man I look up to, not only for his writing, but for the video series he did on the BBC in 1972 titled Ways of Seeing, where he discussed art historical concepts, including the nude. I'm talking, of course, about John Berger. The same year, he published the book version of Ways of Seeing, and I want to read a passage of it concerning the difference between nudity and nakedness. To be naked is to be oneself. To be nude is to be seen naked by others, and yet not recognized for oneself. A naked body has to be seen as an object in order to become a nude. The sight of it as an object stimulates the use of it as an object. Nakedness reveals itself. Nudity is placed on display. To be naked is to be without disguise. To be on display is to have the surface of one's own skin, the hairs of one's own body, turned into a disguise which, in that situation, can never be discarded. The nude is condemned to never being naked. Nudity is a form of dress. Now you probably understand why I admire Berger so much. The nude is objectified. It's there for the male gaze. It's there to be looked at. Nudity, as Berger says, is a disguise, and as shown by the controversy this painting created, it's a very rigid disguise. The simple appearance of green-laced sandals is enough to break the objectification of nudity. This woman is, unacceptably so at the time, herself. Berger also wrote that there's only a handful of artworks that depict nakedness instead of nudity. Indeed, they are no longer nudes. They break the norms of the art form. They are paintings of loved women, more or less naked. Among the hundreds of thousands of nudes which make up the tradition, there are perhaps 100 of these exceptions. In each case, the painter's personal vision of the particular woman he is painting is so strong that it makes no allowance for the spectator. I need to disagree with Berger on one thing here. He assumes that the painter is a man, and that to paint nakedness, there needs to be such a connection between the artist and the model, usually love, that objectification becomes difficult. But what if the artist is a woman? As far as we know, Lilias Torrance Newton wasn't in love with the model, and women can objectify other women. There is such a thing as the internalized male gaze, but I believe that one of the reasons why this model isn't an objectified nude is because she's painted by another woman. The model doesn't need to be modest, to be shy or prude. She can be who she is despite wearing clothes or not. Lilias Torrance Newton could also be herself by painting this model the way she wanted, despite the sensitivities of the time. And I'm willing to bet that, in terms of being cancelled by the AGO, being a woman didn't help her. Lilias Torrance Newton's nude in a studio isn't only a testament to the sensibilities of the time, but also an example of how women were continuously pushed out of the art world. The same way nude paintings were scrutinized, tightly regulated, and rigidly enforced, so are women's behaviors, actions, and evidently, their art.